Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Golick, and I'm the Health and Wellbeing Consultant at Bellin Health. Thank you for joining us for another Mental Health Moment series. So really exciting to bring you some great content today, and we also have an additional special guest. So as always, our dear friend Charles Latour is with us, who's our behavioral health therapist, regular on our series. But we also today have Eric Nelson, who is one of our Bellin Health chaplains. So welcome to you two.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this month, our Lifesaver Wellbeing series is all stressed up and nowhere to go. So really taking a look at stress, the impact of stress, and what to do when we don't know how to further cope with that. Today, we're going to dive into that, but we're going to take it a step further. We're actually going to look at burnout. Burnout in terms of coming from that never-ending stress. And ironically, about a year ago, COVID-19 was designated a worldwide pandemic. So I think after a year of stress and change and having to be flexible, I think this is a really pertinent topic. So Charles, I want to begin with you. Can you help us define what is burnout?
Yes, I can help us define, but I'll even start with saying it's not it's fairly easy to define, but it's really hard to narrow down too, in the sense that it's not necessarily like a diagnostical DSM-5 sort of issue. It's this prevailing sense of fatigue that is both physical and emotional, psychological. I describe it as like a vital fatigue, where almost all of your vitality seems drained. And many people think that overlaps with depression. Like, is it depression? But it isn't quite depression, because when it's not related to work, the person can actually feel pretty good. Unlike depression, that is more pervasive, and there might not be those periods of time where someone is feeling good. So it's a little bit difficult. And the other thing that makes it difficult is there's some people who will argue that it's almost specifically job related. That is like work burnout, but it doesn't have to be. There is burnout from caregiving. There can be burnout from parenting, and there can be work related burnout. So there's a little bit of variety in what that is like as well. So I guess I'll say two other things that I think are really important to it in terms of defining or describing the characteristics. The first one, with that physical and emotional exhaustion, is that almost anything you do seems to be like a Herculean effort, especially when it comes to work. Like, even the smallest tasks, like, well, I can't believe I have to do this. Can you believe I've got this one more thing? Because it feels like there's this never-ending list of things that you have to do, and you don't feel that you have the capacity to meet what the list needs are. The second thing is this pervasive, almost prevailing sense of lack of accomplishment. That even when I do something good, I don't really feel that great about it. This isn't lighting me up like the way it typically would. And the other factor in that is this sense where I have to do so much just to do the bare minimum. And that is a difficult thing to deal with as well. And then the third one is like a sense of depersonalization. Not feeling a part of, not feeling that you're with others. You even can become cynical and critical of what other people are doing, especially if it seems like they're enjoying what they're doing. So I'll sum it up by saying it's this overarching physical and psychological reaction that work can bring that sometimes lead us to feel that rather than going to work, root canal might be more appealing than showing up that day. That is what sometimes people will describe to me what burnout is like for them.
I think that's a really good description, Charles, and really speaks to the idea of just the difficulty. And I think of it as you're just trudging through concrete. Every step is just, it's tough, and you just don't know how to get out of that funk. Eric, did you want to add anything to that and how you've seen that play out, how you've maybe seen burnout in certain individuals and the circumstances that they may be dealing with, maybe with having a sick loved one in the hospital, or maybe some of that healthcare burnout that we may see?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Linda. The image of burnout works really well for me. I think of a campfire. It's burning brightly and it's bringing warmth to everyone, and then it burns down, and then it can just turn to coals and it can go out. And I think that can be the experience of burnout. Where did all the energy go? Where did all the heat go? What I see in burnout are a couple of things. One is I'm thinking of my own colleagues, and not just chaplains, but ministers in general, and healthcare. One is just that reduced ability to work. Like, you come to work and you've got this list and you just can't do it. Or you can do it, but it's very, very slow. The energy is just gone. Another is compassion fatigue. I think most people in healthcare, we're in it because we want to help people. We're called because of that. And then it just seems like, gosh, I just don't have the compassion. I am just not caring as much about other people suffering. What's happening? What's going on? I don't understand. I know I can be compassionate, and yet I can't anymore. A couple other things that I've seen, maybe this is more with guys, I'm not sure, but like an irritability, just really a hair trigger kind of mood problems. Like Charles said, not quite depression, not quite there, but just irritability about everything. You see that at work and at home. Another thing is losing purpose. I've seen this. We're called to some job, and all of a sudden we feel like, gosh, maybe I'm not called to this. Maybe I would just rather do, anything else actually than my job, because this is just so hard. I think you can generalize all these things to caregivers too. You might become a caregiver for your father or mother, or even a child with a high sense of purpose. This is what I feel that I'm called to do right now. And 3 years later, and several, severe illnesses later, it doesn't seem so purposeful, because we're so given to it that we start to burn out. So those are some of the things that I've seen.
Thanks for that, Eric. I even think in terms of everything we've been dealing with since the beginning, I think in the beginning of COVID, I was very much wanting to look at every news story and learn everything that I could. And now I've learned to really monitor that for myself and maybe only take in so much. And that's just something that's been helping me. So Charles, what happens if somebody is going down that burnout path and if they don't address it in any way? What can happen?
A lot can happen, and in the direction of what Eric was mentioning, and even in answering that, I'm going to kind of set something up, and maybe some of the people in the meeting, there's a TV show titled A Million Little Things. I don't know if any of the viewers are familiar with it, but in the opening episode, you find out that there's 3 couples who are the central stars of the show. And one of the people on the show is dealing with this topic, burnout. Many of the things that we've mentioned, much more easily irritated, doesn't like his job, loved it, but now doesn't. Incredibly successful, but now can't take going to work anymore. Just the smiles and the laughter and what he's asked to do compared to what his purpose in life that he feels is, leads him to the brink of something disastrous. And that's what's going on throughout a lot of this process, is we become different than who we are. And the irony sometimes of burnout is we experience it happening, but sometimes not even experience it as burnout. other people start to see things in us, like the compassion fatigue that, maybe I don't get the same light up that I used to get from helping somebody. Now it just seems like a chore. Now I don't get the same benefit out of this conversation that I did. Now it just seems like a chore to sit through this meeting. And other people can see that withdrawal sometimes from the joy that you got out of the job than you did. So there's like this parallel process of what's happening to you and what others are seeing happening to you. And sometimes that's at home, sometimes that's at work, sometimes that is both. But there's personality that's taking place. And if it stays with you long enough, that's when it can go into depression. That's when it can be even more pronounced, and then other symptoms of depression. So I describe it as this overarching fatigue that's emotional and psychological that can lead to psychological despair or depression and or any array of physical things from hypertension and other medical complications. And one other key factor in this that always makes it risky is a coping strategy. Sometimes for that is what? I'll have a drink afterward. Maybe I'll have another drink. Maybe I'll even have another drink. So coping strategies can tend to be, if they're maladaptive, in the direction of maybe some alcohol or drug misuse. Or the other one that's pretty common is food misuse, eating away at my burnout, eating away at the emotions, trying to eat away without even knowing it, the issues that are affecting me. So those are the things that can often happen with it. And Eric, I'm curious if there's another portion that I'd like to say, but I'll come back to it if there's anything you would like to chime in on there too, because I think there's another really key element to it, but I want to, join in with what you have to say first.
It's where we go with like strategies or?
Well, not necessarily that, but anything with regard to when you've seen it go to a little bit further down the road.
Oh, I see what you mean. Well,
What have you seen happen?
Yeah, well, one of the things I've seen happen is definitely, the same. People turning to, drugs, alcohol. People in ministry are subject to the same temptations as everyone else, and some people turn to that in unhealthy ways. So I've seen that happen. I've seen people, withdrawing into, unhealthy activities, I'll just say. That take them far away, as far as entertainment and so forth. That's, not appropriate. And yet it takes them far away because they feel they need to be there. So I've seen that. And that leads to a lot of shame and other problems. Takes them far away from the support that they actually need. One thing I've seen is a hesitancy to talk about it, even to admit, in a simple way, hey, I'm burning out. I'm having a hard time with my work, and having that conversation or not having the conversation. That's where it can go is, you catch it a little early. You talk about some difficult visits. In my own case, I had some really tough visits. I want to talk about them. Incredibly helpful, avoiding burnout. Okay, now I do 10 visits like that and I don't talk about them. Now I'm on the road to burnout. And I'm less likely to bring it up at that point, oddly. So that's what I've seen is, not kind of letting it go too far down the road. Then it's harder to correct than it is early on.
Linda, is it okay if I chime in on that?
Please do.
Yeah, so I love where Eric's going with that. And I think it's really key is that there's one word that in all of the research associated with this is cynicism. Cynicism of myself, what I'm doing. In that TV show that I was telling you about, the guy felt critical of himself that I'm making all this money, but I'm not doing anything meaningful. I'm making stupid commercials. that without that meaning, the cynicism of yourself, the cynicism of your environment, the cynicism of what is happening, it's this incredible cynicism leads to so many other things. And that's where that irritability comes from. And the other thing in it is that when it leads to this thing of one thing that creates it is this all work and no life scenario. So I describe it as I'm all work, I have no life. What do I expect? I've cut myself off from all of this life around me, and this is what it is. And there's this subconscious psychological resentment about the work you're doing to begin with. So you'd start to really dislike and dread the work that you're doing. And sometimes that leads to dread yourself. And what's often leading to not wanting to go there. So I want to tell you, one of the leading researchers in this in general is a woman named Christine Maslock, and she was doing this presentation in Sweden. And Sweden is really, really, in their own way, grappling with this. And they invited her to speak, and it was a really big deal that this American was coming to speak on this topic. And Sweden has this system in which they have this depression from stress, from work, that, and if it's pronounced and prolonged long enough, you could have like this period of time off from work to get better, get your health back, and then return to work. And what they were finding was people were taking that time, getting the help, but the work environment was still such that they didn't feel that they can go back. So I want to circle this back to what Eric was saying, is that sometimes this can be pronounced enough, but we don't seek help. We don't want it. We could wait too long. And it goes back to something we had talked about in a previous program, this idea that sometimes asking for help is giving up, but asking for help is really refusing to give up. But sometimes our workplace has become this subconscious psychological competitiveness that we don't feel that we can show weakness. There's this, Maslow calls it destructive competitiveness, where we get so caught up in it, we refuse to admit that there's a weakness that we have, which keeps us from getting help. And instead of getting help in working through burnout, we're actually facilitating it. Because if there's nothing that drives burnout more, it's this tendency to be perfectionistic all the time about our work. And that's the fast track to burnout in a paradoxical way. So that's what I wanted to tie in as well. So thanks for giving me a few minutes to do that.
So much good content there. It's so helpful for both of you to really frame up what it can look like, what's going to happen if it isn't addressed. And even just before I came to this call, I just happened to get an article sent to me that talked about the burnout in nurses. And one of the things that said that I thought was really helpful was a coping mechanism. So let's turn to some strategies. So hopefully now, through hearing Charles and Eric, if you are feeling what they are talking about, or if you know someone that may be experiencing some of what they're talking about, we really are going down that burnout path. So let's work to get some strategies here to get us maybe off that path and on the right direction here. So this article was talking about how one of the big mechanisms to helping people if they're feeling burnt out is having connections, having those connections, whether it be coworkers, whether it be trusted family and friends, but having those safe places. So that was one thing that I just recently read about. But what do you two find as strategies that you've seen work for people, maybe coworkers, Charles, maybe for you, patients, Eric, certainly you've talked to many people over the years. So we'll start with Charles. What do you think works if people are feeling burnt out?
So connection is definitely one of them. And I know Eric has a couple things to go through. So let me say a couple, then we'll defer to Eric for a little bit and I'll round it out. But when it comes to work, I do want to highlight two things. One is that there is your best friends at work, who you're connected to, doing that, which even ties into one of the things we didn't mention in what we were just talking about, but one of the down road effects of burnout is on our relationships and that more irritability. Our kids could find us, Dad, what's up? Or Mom, what's this? You know, that we're more reactive than we typically are. So when we solidify our connections, that tends to help. There's one caveat when it comes to work, and that is sometimes the connection that we need most is the one that's least happening, which is our connection with our supervisor. There is some research that tells us that staying connected always works, but if there's any difficulty, that burnout was created from the supervisor-supervisory relationship, and it's a leadership or management issue creating that. Creating a better connection with your supervisor is incredibly vital to being able to overcome burnout. But most of them function in the ways to combat burnout fall primarily under the areas of self-care, other than those relationship structural ones. So, and we'll go through those. Maybe Eric and I will tag team through it. So Eric, if you want to go through what you have, and then I'll kind of chime in from there.
Thank you, Charles. I gave some thought to this, and I'll go through some of the ones that I use at work and then some outside of work. So during COVID, this became kind of a pressing matter for our department because we are engaging with so much suffering. And one thing we came up with is we got permission as a department to take 10. Well, what that meant is anybody could just say, I'm taking 10. And that meant 10 minutes where they would not be taking pages and would not be doing anything and could just take a break. They could take 20. They could take 30. They could take as much as they needed, and maybe it was a walk they needed. Okay, well, you're going to need at least half an hour to do that. So that was really helpful. And just as permission to ourselves, oh, I'm going to take 10. That really helped. Another thing was talking and debriefing with colleagues. With COVID, we saw a lot of very painful situations, mostly isolation from family, some physical pain, but really more just the overall situation. We had to talk. And so we talked about these cases with each other, and that helped. Another thing we did is watch our hours. So I think a key risk of burnout is you're just working too much. So if you had to work a 12-hour day on Tuesday, you could work a 5-hour day the next day, and we just worked with each other so that was possible, so we didn't burn out. Another thing is, I think a general thing is just drawing boundaries with other people's stress and emotion. So obviously, as a chaplain, I'm dealing with people's emotions all day long, which is great. But do I have some techniques at the end of the day I can switch that off? That's actually better for me and for my patients if I can do that. Because if I carry all that home all the time, that's going to lead to burnout and I won't be able to. So drawing boundaries, that's tricky. Charles, you might have some good techniques there. It's easy to say, it's hard to do that one, drawing boundaries. Another thing is just breathing. When I'm under intense stress, I'll take some deep breaths through my nose, maybe just 3 times, maybe 10. Doesn't take long, helps a lot. Outside of work is important too. I found having a hobby is important. It's just something that'll take my mind off work completely. For me right now, it's playing the piano and working on electronics. So I can't think about work if I'm doing those 2 things. So that's very helpful. The regular things, here, exercise, eat right, sleep right, all that stuff. Entertainment and recreation, although that can go in a bad direction, right? or it can go in a good direction. I have a colleague who he does bike racing. That's his thing on weekends. Great, very healthy kind of thing. For me, I love stargazing. Go outside, look at the stars. All right, good recreation, having something like that. Prayer, meditation, you can do that at work too. If that's part of your practice. And Charles mentioned, and Linda, you too, family life, friend life, connecting with my kids, connecting with my spouse. Very helpful. And one that I always forget about, but my brother's really good at, is humor. So he'll send me these really funny videos, and I'll look at them, and they're just hilarious. And I'm always surprised how much laughter helps with stress. So those are some of the strategies that I found and my colleagues have found that have helped us get through COVID and just regular work, regular life.
I love that, Eric, and I love that you had so much going on in your department, and there was so much recognition of people needed that break, and you all helped each other through that, and I'm sure you continue to do so, and I think that's huge. And definitely having that relationship with your supervisor and being able to be open and honest and say, I really need a break right now. And if you haven't had those conversations, it's time to start. It's time to start, because it just pays to be honest, because they may not know what you're experiencing unless you verbalize it.
Yeah, our leader has just been fantastic with us, and listening to us about what we need, helping us with scheduled time off, taking flex time, all of that. And it really helped us as a department.
Great. So glad to hear that. Charles, what else do you think are some strategies that may help people?
I think all of those things I would echo. I think they're fantastic. That was a great listing. And again, all of the research tells us, as well as everything that anybody on the call probably has done, is experience is the best teacher. What are our go-to self-care strategies? Often, if we've progressed into burnout, we've let those go to some extent. Recommitting to them is the key. Starting with the relationships and then our self-care things. The other things I'll kind of blend in with what Eric described is, one of the things that we know that fast tracks burnout is if you look at your phone, mindless social media seems to have some effect on fast tracking burnout. Working from home with less interaction has fast-tracked burnout. We're 30% increase in burnout since COVID hit because of the lesser degree of the interaction. The inability to separate that all work and no life by creating life, and dovetailing with the take 10, is that if we every 90 minutes, our body, whether we know it or not, is telling us to take a break, a strategic break. Even if it's going to sharpen our pencil, that is a break. But we get into this burnout syndrome and this competitive work syndrome that we don't take a break. So there's this story in which two people were chopping wood in the woods, and their goal was to chop as much as they could. And throughout the day, one person took a break, a 10-minute break during the morning, took a lunch break, took a 10-minute break in the afternoon, and then a 10-minute break later on before they ended. And the coworker was getting really, really upset. Like, what are you doing? Every time I said, well, it'll be okay. And at the end, they counted up all their wood. And to the surprise of the guy who took no break, the guy who had taken the breaks had cut more wood than he did. And he said, okay, I don't get it. You took a break here, 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 and here. How did you cut more wood than me? And he said, you may not have noticed it, but every time I took a break, I sharpened my axe. And we sometimes don't get that we all have that axe to sharpen day in and day out, and our energy is finite and it gets depleted. And when we're in their burnout syndrome, as I was mentioning, we're working twice as hard to do twice as little, and we're trying even harder. We get in this cycle that we have to break, and those breaks help us do it. So that's one, Eric said if Charles has any way that you could help with that and make sure we stick to it. But setting the boundaries, sticking to them. Every day have a hard start and a hard stop and a hard break time. If you could at least infuse your day with those, you will be better off at combating it. But the key in all that I've seen and all the research represents is the main thing is like infusing purpose. Whatever it is, when burnout seems to be at its peak, our meaningfulness and what we're getting out of work seems to be at its lowest. One of the greatest researchers in the theory of personality at work is a guy named Robert Hogan. He's saying we're doing one or all three of these three things every day. Getting along, getting ahead, and making meaning out of what we're doing. When burnout is happening, we're no longer getting along and interacting with and nurturing relationships. We're no longer getting ahead because we're just trying to stay above water, and it seems like we've lost meaning. So being able to recalibrate, reset, find that purpose, whether it's in the current role or not, sometimes it's just being able to step back and redefine that. It doesn't mean you have to leave your job to find purpose and meaning in what you're doing. But then even sometimes it's going to a greater place, which is, okay, even if I am not feeling this in the moment, what can I still be doing to keep trying in my way to make my work a better place, my world a better place, and my life a better place? If we could expand that purpose rather than have it shrink, we are also psychologically not only combating burnout, but actually going in the direction away from it. So those are the other things that I would highlight as the best ways to combat burnout. Making an impact outside of me rather than internally is the best way.
Great content there, Charles. I was struck by talking about the wood and taking breaks and how that person actually chopped more wood. There's so much research out there that talks about better productivity if people take breaks. So I think, we are here today to give you permission to take breaks. It's good for you. It really is. Also, I just love the idea of it really all comes back to that self-care, right? We have to do things to take care of ourselves. We have to set those boundaries. Sometimes we have to say no. You cannot pour from an empty cup. So whatever that means for you, however you need to fill yourself, whether it be with a hobby, finding renewed purpose in things that you're doing, we need to fill ourselves. So I do want to turn to questions because I think there's going to be some questions with this topic, which I'm so sad, I'm so glad to see. And there is a question out there: how can a leader support an employee who is showing signs of burnout but not recognize it in themselves? How can a leader support that employee if they're not seeing it?
Eric, you good with me going, or do you want to say something first?
Well, I was just what comes to mind is bringing up, reflecting back what I'm seeing. So, when I was a pastor, dealing with not so much staff, but volunteers actually, who would be taking on too many things, I would say to them, it seemed like your bandwidth here is getting pretty narrow, and you seem pretty overwhelmed in that meeting. Do you really want to take on this project again next year? Do you want to be on this committee next year? Or maybe you step away. Conversations like that. And they're powerful because they give permission from the leader, right, to take a break and to care for themselves. And that's a powerful thing when you're hearing that from your supervisor, because they're not demanding more, they're demanding less because they care about you. That's what I found, is that it was very powerful to bring that to the people who are, who you serve, in the case of a pastor, I guess, or a supervisor who you're responsible for.
Yeah, let me say a couple things. I really like where Eric's going with that. It's the supervisor showing they care. It goes back to that old saying, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. Supervisors are always looked at by the people they lead as, because you are my leader, you are either here to help me or to hurt me, to make a positive difference in my life or not so much, which is why that leadership role is often one of the key factors in burnout. So when a leader is taking time, and what I'll dovetail with what Eric was saying is the key is to be able to not assess, not allege, not accuse, but to make caring observations of what you're noticing and asking if there's something you can do to help, or what they might need. And if you have an idea, to bring that forward. But you don't even use the word burnout, just citing the specific things, observations that you had of this employee, your concern and your caring for them, and whatever you might in the way of leadership suggest, but get their input too, and see what you can do about it to help the situation. So you're not confronting, you're showing how much you care. You're not alleging, you're being curious. You're not accusing, you're being extra interested. And you're not prying, you're showing that as a leader, you value them and what's going on, and you want to find what's going to make something better than it is, whatever that might be. So I think that type of approach is essential to being able to, at that point, if nothing else, get the person to share with you what might be going on with them, and then what can be done about it. Then you can start the problem solving portion of it to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Just somebody showing that they care, I think, really goes a long way. And certainly, if you're asking that question, you probably do have a good relationship with that employee, and they probably will hear that from you as well. Like, whoa, this person really cares enough about me that they're noticing this in me, and they want to help. So that's great. If you have other questions, feel free to chat those in. We'll definitely take those. As we're giving you a moment to do that, final thoughts from both of you today on the topic of burnout, stress management. As we are all still here a year after COVID really came into our lives. I think we all should be really proud of that. But closing thoughts today.
Eric, you want to start us off?
Sure. Yeah, I guess what's on my mind is pretty simple. If you want to take care of other people, take care of yourself. We're in the healthcare business. I really think most people are drawn to this because we want to help people. We want to care. And it sounds great and so purposeful and such a high deal, and it is. But there's a danger that we'll run out of energy and be unable to do the very thing that we felt called to do. So I would just encourage, all of us to take care of ourselves so that we can take care of others and get that healthy cycle going, and then we'll be okay.
Yeah, I agree. The ability, if you're not taking care of yourself as much as you're trying to take care of others, eventually it's going to work against you. So I love it. The other couple things that I would say is kind of in reflecting on all of this, and I do want to cite one reference if anybody is interested in this topic and would like to read more. Christine Maslach, it's Maslach, is one of the leading authorities on this topic. there's another person, he wrote a book, his name is Pfeffer, Pfeffer. The book is called Dying for a Paycheck. And if anybody is interested, this book is unbelievable on this topic. It's just, not only well researched, but incredibly well written. But the idea is that at the end of the day, looking at being self-aware, am I aware of signs and symptoms? Am I aware of what I'm letting go that I know is part of me taking care of me? Am I nurturing my relationships, or have they fallen off? When I go to work, do I have this sense of dread or the usual interest and appeal and vigor that I typically have? And at the end of the day, when I go home, do I feel that I've been fulfilled, or do I feel that there's something there? That might be, if any of those are off in your life, that self-reflection, that I'm not taking care of myself as well as I need to, I'm not transitioning from work to home, and I'm taking my work home more with me than I want to be. Not even burnout. Am I at risk to go down that road? And what might I do about it? Who would I talk to? Having an opportunity to utilize these strategies and see where it takes you, but always be connected to purpose and maintaining my relationships. And when this is happening, I am more me on the way to being the best version of myself, rather than letting sometimes the process and all that we do work against us. And the last thing I want to say is the awareness of, am I using how hard I work as a badge of honor? And that is that competitiveness that we think the harder we work and the badge of honor that we have by doing this is me being strong, this is me being great. That is more risk than helpful in burnout. Being able to be strategic about how we recover is as important or more in what we expend in all the hard work we do. So recovery matters as much as expenditure, and hopefully everybody has strategies that is helping them do just that.
Great content from the two of you. I can't thank you enough for providing all that. I think we all got some food for thought today and some real practical things that we can look at in our own lives and figure out how we can continue to take care of ourselves. I did put in the chat, what's the one thing you'll commit to this week to help take care of yourself? Because it all starts with us doing that one thing. So Maureen is going to do exercises by her physical therapist. Elizabeth is going to say no to some added work. So that is great stuff. I would just invite all of you to really think about what is one step that you can take this week to put yourself down that path and to take better care of yourself to really prevent that burnout. So thank you so much to the two of you for joining me today. I thought we had a really
You're welcome.
great discussion, lots of great advice. So again, thanks to our audience for joining us, and hope all of you have a great rest of the day. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.